and the Pledge of Allegiance. We'll start with a prayer, reading, or thought of the Pledge of Allegiance, and we're looking to the audience for any participants who would like to help us with that. Are there any who would like to offer a prayer, reading, or thought, or lead us in the pledge? Prayer? Pledge? Okay, thank you. Come on up, Ralph.
Ralph Clegg. Our kind eternal Father in heaven, we're grateful for the opportunity we have to gather this day, the freedom which allows us to gather, and the great freedoms we enjoy in this country. We are grateful for the processes of government and that allow for citizen participation, and we pray that those who are participating today will be wise in their comments and discussions. The commissioners will be able to use wisdom and judgment in the decisions they must make. And we're, again, are grateful for this country in which we live, for those who defend our freedoms, our servicemen, and those who lead this country. We're grateful for those who protect our freedoms here locally as well, our law enforcement agencies and others who spend so much time in protecting us as citizens. And again, we pray for wisdom and good judgment as we go forward, and do so in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Please repeat the pledge with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, for purpose of organization, we have a number of items on consent and regular agenda. We'll place everything right now onto a consent agenda to either be approved or adopted or ratified. And then we'll go through our agenda and find those that we'd like to pull off from that to have discussions. So on our published consent agenda, there are 9 items. I did not have any that I want to pull off.
Anything from consent.
Okay. On the published regular agenda, number 1, number 2, number 3, if we could pull those off. Also number 12 for action, 13, 14, and 15.
Those are actually
Yours as
yep.
well? Okay. So those, we have pulled those off for discussion. Everything else will be either approved or agreed to. Any comments on that? Okay. Seeing none, we'll go back to the first one then as the presentation by our audit, Gilbert and Stewart.
So this one was a request to strike.
Oh, is this a strike?
Yeah.
Okay.
This was, I think the request was actually for next week's agenda and ended up this week, but it's got to be next week or beyond.
So do you want us to strike it or continue?
Just
for next week?
strike rather than continue, because we'll
Okay.
reload it.
Okay, move that we strike regular agenda item number 1.
And for purposes, since Commissioner Ainge is not here, I'll be seconding, and I'll second that. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That passes 2-0. All right, number 2. Number 2 is to approve property tax actions contained in the recommendation letter. There was one in there that I know we took action on. The Board of Equalization, it's the Harmons. And I was told that they were gonna be here.
Yeah, they're here.
Okay. Do you want to just kind of go through that? I think that was done last year. I think the Board of Equalizations was last year.
Seems like it was just a couple months ago. I think it was this year.
Was it this year? I just saw the papers with
Lisa could
commissioners from
probably-
last year.
Was it this year, Diane? Yeah, it was just a couple months ago.
Okay.
Yeah, the Hardman property was taken off of Greenbelt for lack of production. Now they've applied here to the Board of Commissioners. I know they're here. They probably want to speak to this. I'll just say that we did look through the resolution that the,
Have to leave that door open, I'm sorry. It's a public meeting, we gotta keep it open.
we did look through the resolution that was passed by the Board of Commissioners concerning properties that are withdrawn from Greenbelt. And this property didn't qualify under the resolution. This parcel was withdrawn because of lack of production. The resolution that you passed last year, whenever it was, deals with if a property is withdrawn for a technicality like a name change or a fence line boundary agreement. So this didn't really fit into that situation, but it was withdrawn because of lack of production. I recommended a denial. The Hardmans are here to speak to that. That's all I have, unless you have questions or if
Okay.
you want to move on to the
And I
third.
believe in our Board of Equalizations, we voted to deny.
Yeah, in the Board of Equalization, you affirmed the withdrawal, so yeah, you denied the appeal. That's correct.
Okay. All right. So I'd love to hear from you. I guess the question is, what's different from the Board of Equalizations? That's the main question.
So the property is pasture land, so there won't be any production on it, so that's a little bit of a technicality there, so it is pasture land. And during the, Board of Equalization, you did make a recommendation that maybe we have an opportunity at probation, since, I mean, we thought we were meeting what we needed to meet, and it's kind of like this process has kind of been a little bit like a road, where at the front the police officer says, okay, don't speed on this road, and you say, okay, what's the speed limit? And they say, well, I'm not going to tell you till you get to the end. In the last meeting, I requested information on the green belt so we could see all of the parameters and make sure what we thought we were doing is what we were expected to do, because, you know, we've been doing it forever, that passed on from generations. It's okay, we think we're doing what we're supposed to, and I have yet to receive anything giving us any parameters or guidelines to proceed on that. I'm hoping that I can get those guidelines, so I'm setting, so that you guys are setting us up to succeed, not fail at this. And that if we could, I guess my plea is to get that probation so that I can keep better records for pasture land. That in my packet at one point, that hayfield was combined with that. So that's why I included the hayfield with the first submittal, which I think confused everyone as far as being crops. And it was just because I'm used to that being all together, because as Commissioner Ivy spoke before of his property, it's because that hayfield and that pasture land have kind of been intertwined. It's, for us, we don't see this field, this field, this field. It kind of intermixes. So I guess that's my plea today, is give us the opportunity as farmers and not developers trying to save a buck. We're trying to save our farm to go on probation, keep better records, you know, come back and say, okay, here's the exact records, because I admit I didn't keep very good records. Sometimes farmers don't. And generations, you know, habits pass on down through generations. So I'm not saying it's right, I'm just saying it's what I'm used to. Anyway, so I guess in essence, not a lot has changed. We did have bee production, honey production on that property. I have a letter of that I hadn't included because I hadn't really thought about it. And also part of that property is in the Jordan River overlay with Lehigh City. So there is a part of that will never be able to be used for anything, can't be built on, can't be developed. You know, basically pasture's about all it can be. Anyway, so we're not developing, and we didn't request the property change, the county did. So we never requested the the change in tax ID numbers. So I don't know if you have any questions. That's
Any
my plea.
thoughts?
I mean, I still kind of carried the same feelings I had from the other meeting. I think you've treated them as one complete farm, and as a result, it should be okay. That's how I see it.
So I guess all I'm asking for is probation and an opportunity to repent and keep better records. Because it is pasture, so it's a little hard with that, but
Diane, can you come refresh my memory just a little bit on some of the technical parts of this?
Okay, so what? So there is no agricultural production on these two parcels. They,
How was that determined? What was you went out there and looked at it?
yes, aerial photography and on-site inspections. They're, they just built a new home out there. Their other home,
that's not ours, that's not mine, different property. I'm sorry, it's different property, it's a different.
okay, there's two homes.
Neither one
out-
of mine,
Okay, I don't know where yours is. There's,
mine's in Lehigh.
okay, so there's two homes.
Oh, hold on. Let's do one at a time. I think it's easier.
So, so prior to those homes being built on it, it is just, bushes and, it's not cultivated, and there's not complete fencing. Currently, there are, little corrals or housing areas, built, just like 4-panel, areas, but the whole parcel is not or has not for the past 2 years been that way. The parcel that was next to it has some alfalfa production on it, but if you remember the aerial photos, and I think there's some in your packet,
Right there by
These-
the Jordan River, right? That little.
yes, these two parcels do not have any of the hayfield production or anything. The rest of their farm production has been being converted to development over the past couple of years. I've been doing lots of rollbacks on the rest of their farm. And so this is pretty much what's left. The hayfields towards Camp Williams and Redwood Road, and then this part on towards the river. And then everything else south of that is, production has basically ceased and there's development.
A little bit of
Okay.
the information is incorrect.
Go
may
ahead.
I?
Go ahead.
A little bit of the information is incorrect. My pasture field, which is, has been rezoned, is on the south side, has nothing to do with the houses. That is still in the family trust. That is under my name. The houses that were built there because, UDOT brought the road through Redwood, through my brother's house, and so he built there, because he was forced to move off of Redwood Road. But that still has nothing to do with the hayfield or the two pasture properties that we're talking about. The property that was developed was a whole separate farm area on 2100 North. This is south of Holbrook Farms, so this is not even close to the property being developed on 2100 North. So that really has nothing,
Which parcel are you referring to?
I'm re-
referring to south of 2100, that's not these two parcels that are on this.
I'm sorry, north of 2100. I'm sorry, south, north. Over by Camp Williams. So north of, clear over by Camp Williams. So it was like two separate farms. So yes, the one on 2100 North has been developed, but the original family property over by Camp Williams has not been developed. And the only two houses were my brother's because he was forced to move off of Redwood because of Mountain View corridor. So that piece that we're talking about really is just pasture. It's all sagebrush and grasses.
Sure.
Okay, my name's Paul Hardman. I look at this today, I have some really mixed feelings on what's going on. As previously mentioned, our family's owned that since the 1890s. It's unfortunate that oftentimes people sit at a desk, look at a picture, draw lines, read a manual, read the law that somebody says, well, potentially this piece of property can do this, can do that, should produce this much, yada, yada. Reality, it's just a guideline. If you haven't been there, if you don't understand farming or ranching, if you don't understand what it's all about, it's unfortunate that decisions can be made by someone that don't understand that and don't understand the reason why a piece of property is used the way it is. Farmers and ranchers do not dictate their agendas every day, like most people that go to work. Our boss, our controller is Mother Nature, as you can very well see this year. That area out there, the last 5 years, has been severe drought. You can grow, and if you need someone to verify that, just ask any hay farmer, ask any cattleman on the thousands of dollars that they've lost because of Mother Nature, yet the manual says they can raise so much production on a piece of ground when it's impossible. Now that piece of ground, 2 pieces now that we're talking about, no, it doesn't grow production. It never has grown production because that's not what it's intended to be. Those 2 pieces of ground they're grazing ground. There's no way to get water to them. They're no different. It's desert, same as West Desert. Same identical thing. The soil is solid sand. You can't grow anything there. You could, possibly. I have a piece over just 4 miles south of there, 20 acres. I've raised horses a big share of my life, and that piece of ground never had an ounce of water on it. I raised 25, 35 head of horses on that continue. 6 months a year, you have to rotate it. Never had an ounce of irrigation water on it. The piece we're talking about is 30 plus acres. Impossible to get water to it. It's sand. It rains, it goes down to the earth and goes over and waters my other piece, subsoils it. It's not going to raise great grass or anything else for grazing. It's not going to be a farm production. It's a dry farm. It's a grazing. It has to be controlled by moving animals in and out whenever you can do that. And that's been done over the years. The piece of alfalfa on the west side, adjacent to the one piece on the on the west side of it, that used to be just arid ground, and my father, we put it into growing crops. We got 22 acres of hay. So I water my hay. The tailwater, if people don't understand, the water that comes off the hay has to go somewhere. It doesn't evaporate. Well, that one piece of ground could not raise the hay if it wasn't for that one piece of ground, quote, there's nothing there. There's a pond there, and that tailwater goes into that pond and makes it so that we can produce alfalfa and the other hay. The county comes and sprays that 2 or 3 times a week during the summer for mosquitoes so that the golfers don't get mosquitoes on them across the river. The ground should be treated at no different than a piece of desert grazing ground, because that's what it is. In the past, there's been a lot of horses raised on that ground. In the last few years, not so much, for a number of reasons. One of them, it's been a desert. You can't bleed blood out of a turnip, and it's that simple. I feel like I'm a very good steward of the ground. I don't want to be treated as some developer or someone that's speculating, because I've put my heart and soul into that farm my whole life. And it's hard when, as we said before, those two pieces of ground was two tax notices. And all of a sudden, a year or so ago, we get notices and we got 7. No notification, nothing was told us to tell us that. Always treated that thing, and you have to treat your farm as a unit and get rid of those lines, because every piece of ground has some aspect to the rest of the farm being production. Now, I see a good article in the paper that you want to help people buy a farm and get them started. Commissioner Ivy is involved in that. That's great. But yet I look at the opposite of this now. They're taking this law that's built to help us out, and now you're going to create that. Take that out of Greenbelt. It's Ivy and the rest of those developers are going to be putting homes in there. What a shame. How can that happen? They put all those hundreds of homes out there where we are. And what do the kids do? They don't have a chance to see a bird, a wildlife. If nothing else, that's a wildlife sanctuary. There's all kinds of wildlife in there, and people see those. And as I say, I've taken care of that ground. And the ivory stuff, I don't even know why that's being brought up. That has nothing to do with this piece of property, nothing to do with it. What happened over there is a result of encroachment of people who you can't fight it, and I don't want to fight it. We sold some ground, yeah, we did. But I'm not against progress. And as far as saying, there's homes being built there. Yeah, I built a home. I had one up on Red Road that I built 50 years ago and lived in it. And here comes 2100 North. Here comes UDOT. I don't ask them to come there. I have no choice. Now they expand it and they move me out of my house. Where do I go? I stay on the farm, or do I move in a subdivision? So I built the house down on our property, down away from everybody, to go along with my farm operation. The corrals that are down there, I have a feedlot up at the other place, and they're going to be a feedlot. I got cattle coming in 2 weeks. That's why they're there. It's part of the farm. It's all one operation. And when you start drawing lines and say, well, this piece of ground, you got to fence it and you got to do that, it kills the operation. It just does. And for that reason, it should not be denied. It should at least give us an opportunity to do whatever. But as far as raising crops, it never will, because it's not possible. As far as raising animals, not raising them, but it can graze some animals. It's desert ground, and that's the way it needs to be treated. Any questions?
I got a question for you.
Yes.
So this property obviously has a lien on it, and you put that lien on it so it could be on Greenbelt.
That property should not have a lien on it.
Well, it does. Anytime you sign up for Greenbelt, you sign an agreement.
Oh,
that-
okay.
that you
Is
will-
that a lien?
Yeah, that's
All
that's
right,
a lien
all
on
right.
the
Then
property.
it has a lien on it. All right.
So, and with that, here's the dilemma I have, is that we went to the Board of Equalization and looked at that parcel and found that it did not have production and voted accordingly. And I hear you today saying that it will never have production on it.
Well, when I say production, I mean crop production. crops. Can have production with animals, absolutely,
Okay.
not crops.
And we didn't find that there was even animal production on that property, or else it would still be in Greenbelt. So with that, you're asking for us to apply the 1347 rule, which which will allow kind of the probation that you're talking about. But you have to go through and prove production. And when we don't have production in the past, how are we gonna prove production in the future?
Because in the past, as I say, it's all been a farm unit. There was 2 pieces over there. In the past, I've run hundreds of horses over there. I've never kept track on where I put my animals, or what field I put them in. I've never had to. I've never been asked to do that. I've never heard of such a thing until when we had that equalization meeting. To prove that it's under production, I guess in my mind, when you're saying production, because you're talking about alfalfa, you're talking about it's a crop production. No, it never will be a crop production. It can't, but production of livestock, yes. Can it sustain livestock? Absolutely. The last 5 years, could it sustain livestock? Pretty dang hard. This year, absolutely. It's got all kinds of growth on it this year. Do we had a lot of rain? Absolutely. But when you're in a drought and you're trying to raise crops, you've got the desert when there are cattlemen running cows out there. Is that productive? Yes. When there's a drought? Absolutely not. There's no production. So the production is definitely in alliance with Mother Nature, what she does. I don't have control on how much water that gets. In a drought year, can it raise some? Yes, very limited.
But you don't have any proof of that, right? That's what you're saying, is you never kept any records that.
No, I haven't
you
ever,
had any-
can't give you proof of what's been on there when it's been over there. I don't know. I feel like my honesty and my integrity is being challenged here. The farm is one thing, that is totally another thing. And that brings bristles on the back of my neck, because I've been honest in what I've done on that farm my whole life. Never tried to take advantage of anything. And now, because it was changed with the lines on there, now all of a sudden you don't have production, which is not true. In the last 2 years, no, I haven't had production on there. I'm not going to lie to you, because I've always felt like all of that property over there was under one umbrella of Greenbelt. The production of the hay, which is good production, a good amount of money, and so you talk about so many dollars per acre, it should qualify. I mean, in my mind, because I've never been told different, how can I be held accountable for something that I don't know about? That's the problem. Had someone come and said, okay, I don't see any production last year, what are you gonna do? Or said, you need to have that, fine. Yeah, it's in that one, Greenbelt, when you go into Greenbelt. We went into Greenbelt on the infancy. When Greenbelt was created, my dad put that in Greenbelt. I had no reason to look at the Greenbelt. All I've done is ever farmed it. I don't run down and read all those rules and regulations. Now, I would have, had I known that I know you have to have so much, yes, I knew that. But I always assumed as a farm unit, that farm was in Greenbelt.
So you're saying your entire farm, bigger than the parcel, and so you'd like to count the entire farm? Is that what you're?
Yeah, I'm saying that no particular unit on that farm, some stand by themselves, but you need every one of them to make the farm work, like the wastewater going on that piece of ground. I can't grow hay over there if I don't have a place to put my tailwater. And that piece of ground makes that possible. That makes me a pond where I can put my tailwater for 4 months of the year. The rest of the year, it's dry. So does that make that piece of ground invalid? Absolutely not. Because if we take that away, you take away the other production, everything else.
Yeah,
I'm
I-
trying to maintain something that's been around for years, and it's darn difficult. It's dang difficult to survive. And then we come along and draw some lines in there and say, you gotta do this, haven't done that. It's pretty discouraging what happens.
I wonder if, Diane, could you address the entire farm versus parcels within, and also these lines that are being drawn? And,
So state code states that each parcel must meet the agricultural production requirements. So it is not done by, if you have 200 acres and there's 10 parcels, each parcel has to show that there's production. So if 2 of those parcels does not have any agricultural production, they're just sitting there, they would not qualify. They could not be sucked in on meeting the requirements because the other 8 parcels meet the requirements. So that's how state code is written. So that's why we look at each individual parcel. Now, I know in your packet, it has a lot of the recorded documents and stuff that the recorder's office provided, showing when different things changed. There were name changes. There were also water rights that were sold to Gardner Plum or Plum
That's
Gardner.
false.
Still not mine.
Gardner Plum have nothing. to
And
do with
so,
my farm.
anyway, so those were provided by the recorder's office. So, so that would address any lines or who recorded what. I don't usually delve into that. I look at each individual parcel, and every parcel has to have agriculture production. I have had email correspondence with Mr. Hardman, and he previously told me that he does not own any cattle, so this must be new cattle that he's purchased or brought in, and that he only owns 3 or 4 horses. And they were on another parcel that's south of 2100, qualifying them for Greenbelt, so that parcel is on Greenbelt because of those horses there. I have not been told any other information from Mr. Hardman as to the grazing, what animals, what kind, how many on these 2 parcels.
okay, thank you.
She just verified exactly what I said. Code. We sit here and we make a decision because the code says this, the code says that. Maybe some of these people need, as I said before, go out and try farming, try to make a living on a piece of dirt. See what that code doesn't tell you. It doesn't tell you about the rain that we just had last night, and you got hay laying out on the ground. You could lose $3,000-4,000 one little rainstorm. Take that out of your paycheck overnight. Code says nothing about that. And as far as I showing production, no, I've never showed production over there. I've never had to. I've never been asked. And she keeps putting in development on this deal. Has nothing to do with it. Has nothing to do with Ivory. Has nothing to do with selling property or on the south side. Totally separate issue. Why are we making decisions based on what is happening on someplace else? I'm still farming over there. I'm still farming where I'm at. That's the fact. The fact is I still use the ground. The fact is it's never shown on production on a piece of paper. It is very productive. It has been in the fact. I've never put cattle on ground. I raise cattle. I raise feeders. I do raise feeders, a lot of feeders. But I do not put them out to pasture. I've raised lots of horse. I've had 20, 25 brood mares for a number of years. That's a lot of horses. And some of them were over there. Some of them was in a different place. Did I write down what years they were? Absolutely not. I don't have time to do that. But I can do. Now, if I need to show that I got production on that property, that's fine. But when they give me the production, how do you justify what you tell me? And I've asked Diane, how many animals do I need on that piece of property? 3 times. Never got a response on how many. Well, how do you tell me? How do you justify? How do you tell me? How do you determine how many animals is on there? Are you determining that by a irrigated pasture, or are you determining that by a piece of West Desert property? There's a lot of factors there to determine whether that is productive or not.
Sure.
So is growing houses on there being productive? No, absolutely not.
Okay. Thank you.
I will just mention that Greenbelt has different land classifications and the production requirements are different based on the different land classification.
Yeah, I mean, you measure with the AUMs and everything, so it's a whole, I mean, a watered piece of ground obviously is way different than a desert piece, and there's a lot of different, the same, for me, the same law that applies, the same statute that applies for Greenbelt, in the way of protection is also one that, in this case, you know, is one that you have to measure to as well, and so it's, it is code, it is statute that's out there, but it's one that gives benefit, you know, if applied to. So my concern is that if we're measuring parcels of land and this parcel does not have production, did not have production, you know, and would have a hard time finding the production even in the future, I tend to support what happened in our BOE meeting and Diane and the staff as they've looked at it. Yeah, right. I don't go out there. I don't go out there as an expert to measure it. That's the reason why we have others that do it. That measure production, and it is a lien on the piece of property, and that lien on the piece of property says that you're going to do this, and this with it. And I think that Diane's gone over and above trying to find ways to make it happen. I don't know about the emails or if it's her responsibility or not for saying this is what you have to do for production. I don't know if that's the case or not. Diane, do you have to do that? Is that in the statute that you measure all properties for that?
I will be by what the state tax commission gives out, so all the guidelines, and it has all the different land classifications and the AUM requirements. Which would have been nice, and after the last meeting when I requested it, when I got it, but I have provided them.
Okay.
So here's my fundamental problem with this whole case. It's the same as it was before. We have the government coming in and creating new parcels because of this easement railroad, cutting up a historic farm, and now we're going to punish the good, hardworking people with extra taxes because the government decided it should divide these up into parcels to put this growth and transportation thing in here when the farm is continuing to be used in the exact same historic manner it's been used for hundreds of years. I will not punish good, hardworking people because the government comes in and cuts up a piece of parceled land. I do not think that's the right thing to do.
So let's talk about that.
And so if the farm is continuing to be farmed as a continuous piece, if the Hardmans are committed to making sure that that particular parcel continues to have grazing animals on it, I think it behooves us to assist them and give them that opportunity.
So let's talk about the parcels and tell us the history of the parcels and the dividing up where the lines are in there. Do we know?
So, the parcels were split up because of the railroad easement. Before that, the only time the parcels have been split up were to put the property, I don't know, 25, 30 years ago in a family trust for inheritance purposes. Other than that, it's never been split up before that. So this one was strictly for the railroad easement. And with what Commissioner Ivy said, we are committed to make this work with whatever your guidelines are. We thought we were on guidelines. Like Paul said, we've done it that way for, you know, I'm nearly 60. So as long as I can remember, we've done the same thing.
So you're saying that the parcel, call it parcel A, was originally a part of a bigger parcel.
In the packet, it shows that the two parcels, the railroad and that hayfield, were all one parcel. at the point it was put in the family trust, that it was
When was
split.
that?
1990 probably, before my father passed. So then it was just split for inheritance purposes. My piece is still in the family trust. Nothing has changed as far as the usage of that. It was just split up for inheritance.
And who split it?
It was, he split it with, to put in the trust.
Okay, so,
So family split it to put it in the trust.
so
And
the
then it
railroad,
stayed.
the railroad or the government didn't split it? I mean, it was
Not
split
at
by the
that
family?
point. We were still using, so you have two pieces of property with a
Yeah.
railroad running in between, right?
Right.
So we were using that whole thing as
Okay.
pasture.
Right?
The fence runs around, basically, those two pieces. And then at tax time, they would treat it as one piece and then deduct the acreage of the railroad. So they
Sure.
just deduct that in the taxes. And then just this year, they decided to actually set it apart in two actual parcels with a parcel for the railroad, and that's what started this whole thing.
Right.
In the-
It was the railroad that triggered this.
And in the last meeting, a person
It was done by the
from-
family. I mean, the family
No,
split it.
not this one, not this
You
one,
said the railroad was, so we got three parcels now. We got one on each side of the railroad and the railroad.
correct.
And for inheritance
That was,
purposes,
no, that has nothing, no.
it was one parcel is what I
With the
heard.
hayfield. So with the hayfield was one parcel. That was split, that hayfield was split out like 20 years ago.
Okay.
Usage continued the same, and then just this year, they split out the railroad. So
Oh, I see.
it's never been split out before, it's always been one, it's had one tax ID.
Yeah.
They just deducted the railroad
So the railroad
acreage.
parcel though never had production. I mean, that was never
It's
really
similar, it's sagebrush,
right,
it's grass,
right.
it's the same, so no. And then we've just always used it because it's an easement.
Let's see if
Growing up,
let's-
I didn't even know it
Let me
wasn't
s-
ours.
Let me see if I get it straight then. So we've got one big parcel, and then for inheritance purposes, there was a split between the parcels, still including the railroad parcel. We had to divide in two, and you had one on one side, the hayfield on one side, you have the other on the other side, and then the railroad came in and made a third parcel.
And the person from the maps department came last meeting and said, yes, they were the one that requested that split for the railroad.
For the railroad, okay.
And in the fall, we had a fire, so we lost some of our fence. I'm actually taking 3 months, 3 months off work, starting next month, to go have that resurveyed, put new fence up. So I am committed to make this work, as long as I can get some guidelines as to what I need to do to appease you guys versus what we're used to. And I agree, we've done it the same for I'm nearly 60, I've always done it the same. So,
Yeah.
anyway.
So I just want to make sure I'm clear. The original parcel that I have right here was all intact, and then the original parcel was all intact, and then there was a split. This was the hayfield side. Then there was a family. The family split it, right, for inheritance purposes, and then after that family split it, then later on this little parcel right here, which is the railroad, split into this.
Here's the corner piece and the big piece.
Split into that piece and that piece, and those are the two.
Those are the two in question.
That I'd like to keep.
And so Diane, with the, if I can show you this. So with this piece right here, and this piece, is there production?
Not because they have not given me any livestock. They said they have not run cattle on it. They have not run horses on it for years.
I think you need to define production, whether you're talking crops or animals.
Well,
mean,
I'm just
pasture land
production
isn't
in general.
always production.
They haven't provided me.
If they would have kept this piece in there as a whole with the parcel,
Then the whole thing would have been
would have been?
The
This one doesn't?
hayfield is not even, acreage-wise, does not even make up half of that. so the agriculture production on the hay portion would not be enough to qualify.
For the whole thing?
Yeah, so actually they're lucky that it's divided off because the hayfield part stays on Greenbelt.
And the others, you can't, like you said, you can't grow anything on it. It's sagebrush and sand.
What's your proximity to Camp Williams?
We are just east of Camp Williams. You know where the driving range is for Camp Williams? The north of the driving range. That piece of property is east of Camp Williams to the river.
Are you in any way, shape, or form connected to the Camp Williams buffer project?
Their buffer, yeah, they wanna purchase that hayfield for their buffer, or lease it.
All these parcels or just the hayfield?
Just the hay, well, there's 22 acres there that they want,
But it's not these two pasture ones.
but it's not the other. You know, you keep talking about production, I don't have records. I don't have records, I have records of production of my farm. Diane has records of the production of my farm. Not every single individual piece on the farm. No farm has that. We have a production of what we produce for the year. That's part of it. And let me tell you where my investment in this. Now, and why I'm so avid about this. Let me tell you what I paid for that. A few years ago, some poachers come down and poached deer. I had 22 horses on that piece of property. Do I have yeah, I can give you records on this. Because they got out and they went up to my house. And a young man and his girlfriend ran into one of them. She got injured. They sued me for $10 million. It went to court. I won in local. I'm not going through the details, but I won in district. They appealed it. They won. We appealed it. It went state Supreme Court. 7 years of hell I went through on this. $300,000 it cost me. Got to Supreme Court and they threw it out. Took them 20 minutes to chew those attorneys out that prosecuted me. They were so far out. The law permitted that to happen. Well, they didn't come back and give me $300,000 to pay for what was being produced on that piece of property. Check it up. It's in the records. Askew versus Hardman. It's now part of the Supreme Court filings. Now, that's my feelings on this. That's what I do. That's what farmers do. We don't sit in an office and make a decision, making assumptions because I sold a piece of property over south that's going to affect what's going to happen over north. You don't know what. I could sell the whole dang farm and go live anywhere I wanted to. That's not in me. People ask, why do you farm? I say, because I don't know whether or not it's bred in me. Nobody in this room would run a farm that I've ran for 50 years. Nobody. I can guarantee it. I'm not saying that facetiously. I'm just saying that's the way farmers are. And to take that away would be not a good thing.
Well, there is a lien on the property, and with a lien on the property, there's a certain agreements that were made, and I mean, I can only measure it according to what we have with liens and according to the law, the statute that we have, and that's where it gets really hard to muddle back and forth with it, because no production, family split it. Even with the other property in there, it'd still have a hard time meeting production, if it would meet production. It's tough.
Yeah, it's tough. The county acknowledges that the railroad split was not the Hardman's decision, and yet the rules still apply. That's why the BOE decision probably came out the way it did. Certainly, my concern, I think Commissioner Lee was mentioning it, if the commission is inclined to provide some sort of relief, now we have a whole greenbelt issue with, you know, the next 5 years. How are we gonna account for that if they, you know, if they do develop here in the next 1, 2, 3, or 4 years? We would have given them sort of a windfall unless we record a restrictive covenant.
So we can
Right.
record a restrictive covenant, and if development comes, then they have to come up with that funding.
That's just a concern, but it is,
I mean,
but we
that's,
can resolve it the way
that's
we resolved it.
navigable.
Right.
I mean, I think that's a valid point, and it's fair, and we certainly shouldn't provide them buffer there, but there certainly can be a covenant put in place with that. Because we certainly should not use the law to try and exempt ourselves out of having to pay taxes if we're developing. And I would fully agree with that.
Okay. Well, a motion then.
Did you want to discuss at all the third parcel?
Oh, there is, oh, sorry. No, I didn't have any questions on the third parcel. I think that maybe we'll, unless you did on the other one.
Nope.
So there might be 2 motions possible.
Okay, get to where we're at here.
If we could address them separately.
Yeah, so I'll move that we approve the property tax action number 82437 on the Mullins Orchards. According to the NADA good condition, the value should be 81,368.37.
And with the rule suspended, I will second that. All in favor say aye.
Aye,
Aye. That passes 2-0.
and I'm going to read the verbiage as recommended on the other 2 parcels. I would move to deny the request with the findings that no legal or factual basis is shown to grant the request of the 2 Hardman parcels.
And I'll second that. That's a denial.
Hmm.
Right? I read it as a denial. Yeah. Okay. I seconded that. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed to that?
Aye?
Okay, that one fails with a split. Any other motions?
So, I guess the next question would be, Paul, can you come up at this point with some type of recommended language on how we could put a covenant into that?
Okay, so we're still on number 2 on regular, right?
Right.
Yes.
Okay. I was a little confused about what just happened there, so,
There was a motion for denial, and that one,
oh,
Failed.
okay, so it sort of failed, right?
Right.
And so now you
Right.
want to look at doing something, okay. Well, I would just say, if, Commissioner Ivey, if you are interested in making some sort of a motion or moving the Hardman pieces forward with tax relief, is that what you're kind of looking for here? Yeah, I would say, the problem here is that normally we would say that we would need a restrictive covenant to where you agree to be in Greenbelt. That's what we would probably like to see. Now, the problem with that is, it sounds to me like that they're gonna have a difficult time getting in Greenbelt because you have to establish 2 years of production. And what I'm hearing is that there were no animals on this parcel for the last 2 years. Is that? Right, so,
And it's recognizing that the last 2 years have been drought ridden,
right,
right? And
So I
so my
suppose-
question then becomes what exemptions are in the law for
Right.
drought conditions? I would anticipate that there's some type of conditions within Greenbelt law for that.
less animals.
there's a,
If it's fewer animals, if it's none, I'd be curious as to what that is, because certainly good management practice.
Access to the river, for watering, if you're talking livestock.
Well, it's not the water, it's the feed. I mean, every time that we have our cattle permits issued during the last several drought years, our allocation of number of cattle that we've been able to put out on our permitted property has decreased because of the drought. There's just simply not the feed numbers there, so.
Most ranches that I deal with that have that, especially out even mountains, Cedar Fort areas, they will then raise like in the late spring and then take them up and then bring them back. And so, yeah, so they do different because it's part of their grazing.
Right, we do different things. I mean, if there's drought problems, there's some of my property that doesn't get anything on it in that year because there's just simply not the feed to sustain anything.
Their management as far as their farm, but
And
usually they don't not do anything because grazing in itself regenerates and actually stimulates some growth. So most ranchers do some management in that way.
we do some management, I recognize that. My question is what is written into the law that we could put in this covenant? Is there anything written into the law that recognizes it?
1 year of no production due to no fault of the owner.
Okay, so they've got a year with no production due to no fault of the owner.
So
And
perhaps,
so they need to come up with some type of proof and documentation that they have a plan moving forward for continued production and show some type of proof of production in the past.
and perhaps what you could do is you could just say that there's a requirement to be in Greenbelt as of a certain date, and then for the next, and then to be in Greenbelt uninterrupted from that point through 5 years from today. I mean, that might be just a clean option, is to say, 2 years from today, you need to be in Greenbelt, and then for the next 3 years. And if you're not for any reason, then you're gonna have to pay this rollback.
Okay?
Dave, does that? Well, no, I was just saying, just,
Because if it's 2 or 3 years from now, it's 5-year rollback plus you get the 2 or 3 years to figure it.
well, no, because if they end up developing in year
If
6
they-
from now,
right, if
then we
they-
can still capture a 5-year rollback.
Then we can still capture the rollback.
Yeah, it's just all about capturing 5 years at any time. Dave, does that work for you? I think that's probably our best bet, is to have a date by when you need to be in Greenbelt, and then in Greenbelt through 5 years from now, after that date.
Okay, so the motion would look like a motion to grant the Hardmans on the 2 questions in parcel tax relief, provided within covenant for the next 2 years they demonstrate greenbelt and production on these 2 particular parcels with a starting date of June 18th, 2019, and continue to maintain greenbelt status for the following 3 years after
June 18th, 2021, right?
2021.
But that violates everything that we set up, because we set up that production would be, approved production for the 2 years. So now, according to our own
Right, yeah, this is
policy,
not,
according to
this
our
is
own
n-
policy, we're not following our own policy with it.
And we can just leave it as it is. I mean, if that's,
leave what as it is.
leave the denial and we're done.
But you moved to deny their request.
Right. It failed. Yeah, you're talking about that motion?
Right.
Yeah, that motion failed.
So if you're wanting to provide some relief, then you would need to do at least one more action. Yeah, granted, this does not comply with a resolution that we recently passed,
Right.
but you could take this action. I mean, this is within your 1347 realm. Just to find what's in the best interest is up to the board.
Right, and that's where the flexibility comes in here, is determining what's in the best interest. And again, I'll state it again, I believe this is in the best interest because I believe this particular farm has been farmed this way historically for over 100 years, based on the evidence provided. And I don't think that that's changed. I think what's changed is we've gotten into some nuances and technicalities, and I'm trying to act in the best interest of these people.
There's no evidence provided is the problem.
And that's, I,
There's no
we,
records.
we each have to make our determination on that. I'm taking the verbal and written testimony of these individuals as evidence. That's
And
what
then
I'm
this would-
basing that on.
This would give them a chance to provide proof. They have between now and the next 2 years to get on Greenbelt.
Yeah. And we, in essence, what happens is we're losing that 2 years that we've already, the 5 years going back is what you're saying. So that 2 years now, we're moving it forward and rolling it forward to another 5 years into the future.
Yeah, I think that's,
And are we restricted? Can we put it as, at the termination of the 5-year period, that they're subject to a 7-year rollback?
No, state statute says 5, so.
I'm asking for the legal opinion. Is
Yeah,
there
I
some
mean-
flexibility in that? Can we,
I think doing a 5-year
can,
rollback is just cleaner, but
and can we assess it with
Challenged.
fines and penalties for the 2 years prior? And those fines and penalties would equate to the 2-year rollback tax period. Does that make sense?
yeah, I think we could,
If,
you have flexibility.
I'm trying to
with the
find a
fines
way
and
to craft
penalties.
that so that's captured, right? That's what I'm after here. I'm trying to address your concern. Can we make this in such a manner that the fines and penalty would be assessed in a manner that would be equivalent, so that we're essentially capturing the 7-year period? So that we're minimizing that risk. Because I recognize, Bill, that what you're trying to do here, and so I certainly, I'm putting full confidence in their testimony that they're going to do this, and that it's not going to be an issue. But if it is, I'm not trying to provide an avenue for them escaping what they should pay. And so if we can assess it as a 5-year rollback at that point in time with, and to keep it within state statutes, with fines or fees, whatever we want to verbiage that, assessed by the county, which would be equivalent to the additional 2 years of rollback taxes.
Yeah, I think that we'd have to take more time and look at this, and the only reason why is because there's potential legal challenges with this, and that's where I think it gets really complicated if we were to do something of that nature.
Well, I think you have flexibility. In the restrictive covenant, we can say that we're treating fines and penalties a certain way, and we're treating tax a certain way, and then
But
we
that's
spell
within
out
a
their
5-year
obligations.
period. I don't know, if we're talking a 7-year period, I think we start to go outside of state statute.
We're talking about a 5-year period. We're just assessing a fine and penalty within that period that would equate to what we're not capturing there.
Right. Yeah. Well, I wouldn't mind taking some time and going down if you want to, and looking at all those options, offline, instead of just on the fly, if we want to look at those. I'd give a chance for Commissioner Ainge to be back too, if he has some other thoughts on it as well.
Yeah, that would be fine.
Up to the board.
Okay, maybe we should continue it then for at least a week.
Okay. Let's see, so making sure I'm still within my parliamentary right here, I can move to continue the pending motion, because we've already had one particular action, but I could move to continue an additional pending motion in regard to the Hardman properties in question in regards to a restrictive covenant,
For a week,
or 1 week.
1 week. I'll second that. All in favor, say aye.
Aye?
Aye. That's continued for 1 week. Okay, number 3. Number 3 is to approve and authorize the signing of a resolution creating the Utah County Public Property Use Policy. And we've been going through some resolutions back and forth. We've had this on our work session. I know that Robert's not here, so Dave's gonna field this one for us. And thank you for those who, participated in this as we're looking down through it. I know there was some other language that we put in there too, that we incorporated in, just to kind of match and make sure we're meeting state statute on some of the other things that we've already agreed to. Dave?
Right, and I'm really just here to answer any questions which you might have. One item that will need to be addressed would be the dollar amount, since
Right.
that is a blank.
There's two on there. There's the first resolution, and then there's the optional version, the second. I would like to see if we can narrow that. I would prefer going with the optional version. That one has the additional language in it.
Yeah, the optional addresses a separate statutory provision and pulls in the policy and then the PO right
Right.
related out of the provision.
Did we put a dollar amount? I'm
We
trying
have
to,
not. That's
in
that's
the,
for
in
us
the,
to,
in the second one, right, in
I think they're both open.
I know myself, I also liked the, the optional version
Yeah.
better.
Yeah.
But I couldn't remember if we'd put the dollar amount in there. As discussed priorly to some degree, for me, I think the $50 number is one that's consistent with state statutes. It's already established for gifts and other things, so it seems to be a dollar that the state likes,
That's per instance.
for instance. And so that was a number that I personally feel comfortable with. Obviously, where it's a per instance thing, we could certainly look at putting that lower or higher. This is one I don't have a super strong feeling. I just hate this whole thing.
I do too.
And you're not
I don't
alone.
think there's anyone that really likes the fact that we have to do cleanup off of some unintended consequences of state law, and that's what this is trying to do. And so the $50 is one that I felt like was just consistent with existing state statute. I think you can find great arguments as to why it's too much and not enough.
Yeah, originally I was leaning a little bit more towards, a little higher, a higher, dollar amount, 100, or even higher, just for protection purposes. But we do have in there that 30-day provision, that if something happens, that it can be paid back. And so I can go with the 50 because we do have that listed in there, for the employee to have that protection. Of course, there is a window, and that's that 30 days. So I can go with the 50. I probably would have preferred the 100, but in this case, I can go with the 50 because of that.
I'm fine to do 100 if you would rather. I really don't have strong feelings one way or another on the dollar
I
amount.
just don't. I want to make sure. The only reason why I'd say the 100 is just because the 50 seems a little bit short, and I'd hate. I just don't want to have any problems with it.
Right.
I want the employees to feel comfortable being able to do what they're doing. We're not trying to say that, you can take things up to $100 or $50. That's not the intent at
Right,
all. It's,
that's-
or use property up to that amount. That's still would still be dealt with on a department basis. But we just don't want to be caught in this potential felony grab.
Right, and that's, so, and like I said, so I would be more than happy to add in the $100 here,
Okay.
okay? And we'll make sure I include that as part of the motion. Any other, I guess, questions, or?
Yeah, anything else?
I was curious if there was any of the employees or anyone here that had questions about this or why it was occurring or comments to it.
I think information went out, so.
Apparently not, and
hopefully
that's, I knew we'd sent the information out, and so I was just curious if there was any, feedback from public or the employees on this one, Richard.
Yeah, Dave, if you can kind of go over that optional language that was put in.
The optional language just addresses a separate statutory provision that was passed a few years ago that it deals with use of primarily a credit card, where if a governmental credit card is used for personal use,
Right.
then that's inappropriate, of course, and there's a 50% penalty
Yeah.
that's added to.
So it'd be 1.5 times.
Right.
So that's in there, so if, you know, if it's a payback in that 30-day window, it'd be at that 1.5.
So it's just covered, to cover that other statutory provision.
So don't accidentally use the county's card to buy something of your own use, is the,
Yeah,
is the underlying message there.
or else you get to pay.
Or else you get to pay 1.5, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I know I would just like to make sure for public record that this particular act is to try and bring some protection, particularly to the employees of the county against inadvertent accidental misuse that would create them a felon. For anyone who's not aware, and the 5 people currently watching, and then hopefully some that might be interested in later, House Bill 163 essentially would made it a felon if an employee or even an elected official accidentally took a pen home.
Right.
Or they brought a personal fridge so that they could eat their lunch at the office and plug that in, and were using county electricity to run that device, or charged your personal cell phone in your office. You would have all of a sudden been a felon.
Yep.
And I don't think any of us think that that's reasonable. Obviously, we want a positive, healthy work environment. We're very serious in our own county policies and procedures against abuse. If anyone is using, public property for personal gain or benefit, we have policy in place, and we're going to act aggressively as a commission with progressive discipline to make sure that that abuse happens. But we certainly don't think if you take a pen home accidentally, you should be a felon.
Yep.
And so I want to make sure that that's very clear, that that's the intent and purpose of this particular
Yep, very well said.
item.
Ditto to that. Okay, ready for a motion?
I will move that we approve regular agenda item number 3 with the notation of the $100 as the amount to be set forth in value.
With it being the
Just trying to-
optional.
Yes, I'll just restart all of that. I'll move that we approve regular agenda item number 3, the optional plan, and that in section 4, the dollar amount is to be set at $100.
And I'll second that. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That passes 2-0. Okay. Number 12 is just to, I know it says prove on there, but it should say
Yeah.
approve.
Approve.
Approve or deny. So that's the only reason why I held that, it's just so we can take action in finding.
I agreed with the approval, didn't have any additional questions.
Yep.
So I'll move that we approve the late 2018 disabled veteran abatement as outlined in regular agenda item number 12.
And I'll second that. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That passes 2-0. Number 13 is a recommendation for a proposal on an RFP. There was a number of they went through a process here for pre-file criminal supervision services. The number one on their recommendation is AMP, and I'm fine with, unless there's, I agree with the recommendation.
Yeah, I
number
didn't
one.
have any additional questions either. So I'll move that we receive the recommendation for the RFP as outlined in regular agenda item number 13 and award the proposal for further negotiations in the contract to AMP.
I'll second that. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That passes 2-0. Number 14 is to adopt an ordinance amending the ordinance establishing the Utah County Good Governance Advisory Board. And there's a blank in there on a date. And so it's, since I know the next one, since we now have a date,
Right.
it'd be in order to,
I'll move that we adopt regular agenda item number 14 with the date of June 20th.
and I'll second that. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That passes 2-0. Now 15 is to set that meeting, a special meeting.
So I'll move that we adopt the ordinance for a special meeting as outlined in regular agenda item number 15.
I'll second that. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, that passes 2-0. Okay, Dave, what do we, I know number 19's for sure, on the
Mhm.
others. 18 and 19, okay,
Okay,
so we
I'll
can
move
strike.
that we strike regular agenda items number 16 and 17.
And I'll second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, that passes 2-0.
Move that we approve and set a date, time, and location for the closed meetings as described in regular agendas numbers 18 and 19 for today's date at this location following the completion of the regular agenda.
And I'll second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That passes 2-0. Those are set. Now we have 2 work session items. The first one is to discuss the community reinvestment area project. And I think Provo's, or no, this is the solar farm one. So come on up, Dale. Thank you.
Commissioners, good morning. Certainly a pleasure to be here with you. I'm Doug Larson with Elevate Consulting. I'm here on behalf of my client, Strata Solar Development out of North Carolina. We're here today to talk to you about utility-scale solar farm project in Utah County. I've had the pleasure in the past, some number of months ago, to meet with both of you gentlemen. I haven't yet had the opportunity to meet with Commissioner Ainge, and I look forward to doing that hopefully in the future. When we first came to you some number of months ago, I talked to you about 2 projects that Strata Solar was proposing out west of Utah, out west of the lake. One of those projects has been terminated. We were referring at the time to that project as Project Brigham, and that's no longer on the table. So I'm here today to discuss specifically Project Eagle. Project Eagle is a 300 megawatt AC solar farm project that we're proposing to develop out west of the lake on approximately 2,000 acres of ground. Based on our preliminary discussions and very tentative discussions that we had months ago with the county and others, we actually moved the project through the conditional use permit process and have received approval for the project at that level. So now we're here to discuss property tax incentives and having essentially the public invest in this project from one perspective to help make this project competitive. Solar farms and other renewable energy projects start very early in their life cycle to define cost, both upfront capital and upfront operational costs, as well as long-term and continuing operational costs. This is a utility solar farm, meaning that the electrical power generated from the system will be transmitted, of course, through Rocky Mountain Power's transmission lines and essentially purchased by Rocky Mountain Power with the identification of an end off-taker. The way we make that happen is to be as competitive as we possibly can in terms of our pricing. That's where property tax incentives come into play. Important on your side of the table is what is the public benefit of having the public help facilitate this type of project, and we'll discuss a bit of that today. So just of note, Strata Solar out of North Carolina, I was introduced to that company about 3 years ago when I was working for Weber County. I was actually their economic development director for a number of years, and I bring that up. I think it's important for you to understand that I sincerely understand your side and the public side of a transaction and a project like this, and that's important to me because it has to work well for both sides. And so I come with that experience and that understanding. As far as Strata Solar goes, I think it's important for you and our customers, our public, to understand that we're going to do business with a company that has depth and strength and integrity. They have nearly 500 employees across the United States. As of last year, they've installed more utility scale solar than any other company in the country. As I've worked with them over the last couple of years, I've found them to be a company with a culture of integrity and innovation, and so I've really enjoyed working with them. My role with Strata Solar is to help them through the entitlement process, the permitting process, as well as tax incentives and abatements. From a visual perspective, I'm going to go pretty quickly. I was advised that our time is short. So if I am talking too fast, please don't hesitate to slow me down. From a visual perspective, this is a project in North Carolina. The project in Utah County would look very similar to this. Our row spacing would be a little more than what you're seeing here, but this is what a typical solar farm looks like if you haven't seen one. This is an overhead of that same farm. Again, the proposed Project Eagle is a big project, again covering almost 2,000 acres. This is a good visual of the infrastructure, the racking system that will be put in place to hold the solar panels. This is very similar to what we would see on the Project Eagle project here in Utah County. Of note, the solar panels on the project here will actually track with the sun. So the racking system will have gearing and it'll move with the sun to capture as much sunlight as is possible. It's interesting, there are no solar farms in northern Utah yet. We hope to be the first. I'm certain other companies are knocking on your door. In terms of solar efficiency, we're seeing obviously more projects down in central and southern Utah. And much of that power actually that's generated from those projects is coming up north. And when power travels across transmission lines for a long distance, there's load loss. And so having the projects here in our backyard, having reduced that load loss makes up for some of the losses we get in the amount of sunlight here as compared to down south. So we're super interested to see solar farm development, renewable energy development expand here in northern Utah. Another picture of a solar farm. This will be very similar to what we'll see here in Utah County. The panels each are 3 feet by 6 feet panels. Solar panel technology is improving measurably year in and year out, meaning we're getting more power efficiency and capacity out of less solar panels. So system sizes are reducing while generating the same amount of power. So in terms of tax incentives, I provided you with, get this open. This is going to be a little hard to see, and I can't control the right side of this for everyone to see all of the numbers on this page. Yeah, if you can blow that up or move that. And I think I can remember most of these numbers from, I hope I can. That's my job. So in terms of public facilitation and property tax incentives, again, we talked about the competitive nature of renewable energy projects, and there are essentially a couple of primary things that make a solar project feasible. One is the system efficiency, how well it creates power. And the other obvious thing is, and I say the term obvious with the utmost respect, is how much the power costs coming out of the back end of the system. What are the utility rates coming out of the back end of the system? And in terms of public benefit, and that's important, I would guess most of the tax incentive projects that have come to you as a commission and your redevelopment agency or your community reinvestment agency are often rooted in jobs, and projects come to you and talk about jobs and indirect benefits. This is not a jobs project. Although there will be hundreds of construction jobs that are created during the construction period, which is 6 to 8 to 10 months on a project of this size. Once the project is fully installed and up and running, it is managed remotely through technology, and there will essentially be 1 or 2 employees that visit the facility on a monthly basis. So this isn't a jobs-based project. This is a project about having the community support clean, renewable energy project. This is a project about having the community enjoy the benefits of a project that doesn't use any water, doesn't impact any sewer, doesn't have any transportation trips of any measure throughout the year. And certainly there's a carbon footprint analysis that comes along with projects like this. Interestingly enough, and this is what I'm going to go to next, is our current property tax structure to some degree favors projects like this with respect to requesting incentives. The top half of the spreadsheet you see is run over 15 years just for analysis and discussion purposes. Solar farm projects will be active anywhere from 30 to 40 years, okay? The analysis you see, again, runs over 15 years. Solar panels and infrastructure on this project will be assessed by the local county assessor as personal property as a provision of state code. And so those top 2 rows show you real estate value and the personal property value. I've made the determination or the estimation of real estate value and held that static at a little over $2 million for all 15 years. We know that's going to change, but to be conservative and simple, I just held that constant. This analysis does not recognize net present value. This is just simply today's dollars. The second row where we're analyzing the personal property values, we're using the state's depreciation schedules. Solar panels fall into the long life schedule, so you can see how that depreciates over time. And I believe about year 19, the depreciation becomes flat and remains at 8% for the rest of the remaining life of the project. But over those 15 years, you can see cumulatively the property taxes paid by this project will be somewhere in the neighborhood of $36 million. You can see the taxes that are going to each of the entities within the taxing area. Moving down to the bottom half of the spreadsheet, this is our tax incentive request. This is where we're requesting the public to participate in your approval. Of course, under the laws now, the Community Reinvestment Project Area statutes, it allows us to negotiate individually with the taxing entities, but the county's redevelopment agency kind of has to set that in motion by allowing the incentive plan to move forward. And each of those entities can participate as they see fit. So in terms of our request, it's different and it's going to be uncomfortable, hopefully uncomfortable only initially. We're asking the taxing entities to provide 100% of the incremental tax revenue or the new tax revenue created from the project for 6 years. 100% deals are fundamentally actually against my nature up until recently. As an economic development professional and a professional representing project, I was never one that supported 100% participation unless there was some extreme issue. But in 2016, our legislature modified the way new growth revenue is handled as it relates to personal property. And this gets very complex, and I'm going to attempt to be as simple as I possibly can be. And so I'm going to revert back to the center section of the spreadsheet, that grayed out row. That shows what we would have normally come to you under the property tax rate math prior to 2016. We would have come to you asking for participation over 15 years at 50%, giving us cumulatively about $18 million in incentive to the redevelopment agency over that 15-year period. And I'm careful to say that increment flows to the redevelopment agency, and then a portion of that, the lion's share of that, goes back to the project. There's a portion of that 18 million that would go to Utah County's housing program, and of course a small percentage to your RDA administration. We identified that as a target number to help us identify our initial operational costs to get into this thing, and ongoing costs at 18 million-ish. And so with the new provisions of how we deal with new growth as taxing entities, meaning investment in personal property, new investment in personal property no longer generates new growth revenue to taxing entities. When we build a house or a new commercial building, real property, the new assessed value generated from that new building creates new growth revenue to a taxing entity. The theory is you have new services, so you'll need more revenue to provide those services. In 2016, the legislature changed that. They took personal property out of the new growth calculation. So you don't enjoy new revenue from new investment in personal property. What does happen with personal property investment, now it acts very much like an increase in real estate value due to the market. So when real estate values go up as a result of a healthy real estate market, like we're enjoying, taxing entities don't get a windfall from that. What happens in the rate process is that increase in value has the opportunity to adjust a tax rate downward or certainly stabilize it for certain. Personal property investment acts like that now. An odd provision in that came out of the 2016 legislation as it relates to new growth and personal property is the only way for a taxing entity to enjoy the benefit of new growth revenue from personal property investment, oddly, is to participate in an incentive program. So the structure you see in front of you, we've proposed that we participate at 100% for 6 years. In year 7, the taxing entities will enjoy 1 year of new growth revenue, and you can see the you can see those numbers. As a perspective, if I can get to this one, this table shows my estimates for each taxing entity, the 2018 tax revenue that's generated from this property. Again, nearly 2,000 acres is just over $1,600 cumulatively. In terms of Utah County's general fund, my estimates are that the property's generating about $120 annually to your general fund. I say general fund because I'm assuming that's where your property tax revenue goes. Most of this property is on Greenbelt. Some of the parcels are owned by the state of Utah, so there is no tax generated at all by those properties owned by the state. That 1 year of new growth that we're proposing under a 6-year structure, so in year 7, those are the numbers that you're seeing in the other column. Your revenue would go from $121,000 to $188,000. Cumulatively, we go from $1,600, and we generate over $2.5 million in new growth revenue that in year 7, assuming the 6-year model is adopted. So in year 8, throughout the rest of the life of the project, that personal property now acts like, again, to a degree, an increase in real estate value. It'll do 2 things. It will certainly stabilize your tax base, meaning it'll stabilize the assessment base, and it may, depending on the taxing entity, it may have the opportunity to lower the rate a bit. So that's a whole lot of information in a very short amount of time. My goal today was, again, to kind of reintroduce the project, the proposal, to let you know the status of the projects in terms of conditional use processes, to formally put our request in front of you and develop a list of questions and concerns or needs that you might have.
Couple questions for you. That 100% participation is still up to us.
Yes.
So it could be from any level in there. It's not just,
That's correct. We identified a target number. We went from 15 years to 6 years, and it keeps us at about that, at $18 million to the projects. It's a little over $15 million.
so Doug, tell me why we would come in at 100% or even at the other percentage, you know, if you were saying 50% at the other way. Why would we do that when we have so many solar farm companies knocking on our doors right now trying to do what because a lot of it has to do with that you've got a line down there and everyone says they want to tap into that line with Rocky Mountain Power and get their, because the capacity is only they only have so much capacity. And there's an opportunity, and a lot of the solar farms see it, and that's the reason why they seem to be coming and talking with us on a pretty regular basis. So why would we do tax incentive on this when it seems like somebody's going to want this for their own, you know, for their profitability in their future?
Well, the best way for me to answer that, you know, why would the public provide tax revenues to a private development that's for profit? I mean, that's kind of the way my mind works, and
Right.
we're saying the same thing. And it circles back to helping this project be as competitive as possible, as soon as possible. And part of the public side is having, I guess, coming to an agreement on the benefits of having a clean, renewable energy project in your county. I think part of your issue is we have a whole list of companies that are coming and asking us to do this. I'm not sure how many companies are as far ahead as we are. I'm not sure how many companies have already received conditional use permit approval on the project. I'm not certain of how many projects are of this size at 300 megawatts generating this type of power, and you're absolutely correct, siting is important, and the closer we can get to high voltage transmission lines, the more efficient, cost effective it can be, because then we don't have to build
Right.
more lines. I would note the press release that was issued the other day from First Solar. They are a solar farm company like Strata that's building another solar farm in Iron County. The Facebook project that's coming to Utah County, which is requiring access to renewable energy, and we're seeing more of that. That solar farm in Iron County will be providing the renewable energy to Facebook. There's another project I'm working on, and you two are aware of it, for this company up in Weber County. We were hoping Weber County solar farm project would be aligned or positioned well enough to be the one providing power to Facebook. That project got everything on their runway lined up first, and they got it through the door. They got incentives. They have pay no impact fees in Iron County, and they were able to enter into a power purchase agreement with Rocky Mountain Power early on. Rocky Mountain Power helped determine the off-taker, Facebook and others, and that project moved forward quickly. So the simple answer to your question is it helps the projects become a reality in northern Utah. The benefit to the public is supporting clean, renewable energy, not supporting a development project that doesn't negatively impact our natural assets. And It provides, in terms of a revenue, just on the business side of it. From my perspective, it's kind of a revenue partnership. We're asking the public to partner with us for 6 years and allow a portion of that revenue or all of that new revenue to fall back to the project, starting from year 7 and moving on if we have that project in place. The amount of investment in this project will help stabilize the tax base and potentially, and I'm careful to say potentially because we don't have the specific math on how this would likely lower some tax rates for some taxing entities. I'm guessing it wouldn't lower the county's tax rate, and I'm guessing it would likely not lower the school district's tax rate if they choose to participate. Because of the size and scope of their tax base is quite large, particularly the counties. So that's my perspective, Commissioner. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, in a roundabout way. I mean, it is a dilemma, as we look at it, because we obviously know that that area is being looked at by many, and I'll tell you, 100% of 100% participation on there just fundamentally for me is like trying to chew on fur.
Yep.
It's does not taste very good. And even to look at that, especially when we consider, where we're at property tax wise and so forth, it's kind of a hard one to swallow. And so, I don't know. I guess we can continue to go through it. At least for me, we can continue to go through the process and look at it and analyze it. I would be curious at the other taxing entities, the Alpine School District and Central Utah, and you have a service area 6 and 8 and 9 in here. Is that
If I understand correctly, in your county, you control those.
We do.
Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
if that's the same service areas that you're talking about?
Yeah. So we all behave a little bit differently, meaning county to county, but I understood you control those.
Yeah.
We can,
We some not and I can't remember the first month I came down and had the pleasure of being with the two of you. Not long after that, we had a very preliminary discussion with the Alpine School District. It was very introductory. I've come to understand the district has developed a set of guiding principles or a kind of an informal policy on tax increment, and so we're trying to schedule a follow-up meeting with them to better understand their priorities now.
Okay. Well, any other questions?
no, I appreciate the time and effort and laying it out there. Obviously there's the 100% participation is a big red flag.
Oh, yeah, that's kind of why I started out. It's difficult and kind of it just feels kind of wrong to a degree. And I would say, circling back on the math equation, if we participate at some other percentage less than 100%, that differential doesn't necessarily flow back to you as new growth like it used to.
Yeah, and I'd have to work through that. I don't quite understand that end of it. I'd like to talk with Chris and Dave and others on that end, because it's I've tried to get my mind around that, and it goes in all kinds of different directions. So
It's challenging, and I'm happy to participate. We've had multiple conversations with the State Tax Commission, the gentleman that actually is in charge of certified tax rates, to make sure we're understanding this correctly. This is a big deal when you think about it. I mean, from one perspective, it feels odd to say if you don't participate, you don't get any new growth revenue. I don't think that was the intention of the legislation. As I understand it, the intention of the legislation was to help stabilize the big swings in assessed value for large companies in central and southern Utah that much of their assessed value was personal property, centrally assessed properties. I know as commissioners, you're very aware of some of the assessment challenges, the roller coasters, with that side of the assessment world. So this was a way to help mitigate some of this. That's the way it was explained to me.
Okay. All right, thank you.
May I ask what next steps might be and what you would like from me?
I would probably work with Todd, and he's always in contact with us, you know, on issues like this, and we kind of work through that direction. And then personally, I'd like to talk, you know, with Dave and and Chris and others on kind of where we're at, and then I think probably just working through Todd would probably be the best on that. Just work with Todd on
Look
it.
at Todd and,
We will.
you know, I agree with that, you know, look at that.
Okay. Commissioners, thank you so much.
Okay, thank
Appreciate
you.
your time and consideration.
All right, next presentation is proposed redevelopment of the former IFA block into a multi-use development.
Commissioners, member of the public, good morning. My name is David Walter. I'm with the Redevelopment Agency here in Provo. The item today is a discussion of redeveloping the entire block that the former IFA building sits on. For the public's benefit, I want to point out that a while ago, the Redevelopment Agency of Provo purchased the IFA store located on 500 South from IFA and helped them, in order to help them purchase the then vacant Office Max building. They subsequently moved, they've reopened, and they've enjoyed a lot of success being at that new location. One of the reasons that the Redevelopment Agency did this, in addition to assisting IFA, was the opportunity to have an impact in the area, because this was a block that only had 3 property owners, including IFA. And as a property owner now, the Redevelopment Agency was able then to leverage our investment in possibly redeveloping the whole block. Unbeknownst to us, the gentleman that's going to follow me in this presentation had entered into negotiations with Mr. York, who was the majority property owner on the block. Mr. York met with us and let us know that he would have been willing to enter into an agreement, but that he had already signed a letter of intent with Mr. Earl, and so he bowed out. We were introduced to Mr. Earl. Mr. Earl made his presentation, and the City Council of Provo, acting as the redevelopment agency, felt that this was the direction that they were interested in, and so we've been working to craft an owner participation agreement that would put the redevelopment agency's property into the project, as well as some tax increments. And with that, if you don't have any questions for me, I'd like to turn the time over to Mr. Justin Earl and allow him to present his vision of what the block could look like.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners. Pleasure to be with you. We did not start talking with Mr. York to circumvent the city. We were not aware that the city was talking with Mr. York. So shortly after putting the property under contract, we did meet with Provo City and the redevelopment agency, and they informed us that redeveloping the entire city block was the precise reason why they purchased the IFA building. Well, one of the reasons. And quickly we met with the RDA board, and they were very supportive of the project. We have since gone and rezoned the property for this project. We have received site plan approval for phase 1 of the project. We've spoken with the Provo School District, and they've favorably received our request for tax increment financing and asked us to prepare an interlocal agreement for them to review. And today, I'd like to introduce the project to you and answer questions and see how we can proceed. Great, thanks so much. So the project's called Mill Race at Provo Station. It's honoring the historic nature of the site. Starting actually in the 1800s, we have fire insurance maps that show a mill race that went through the property, powered some lumber and flour mills as well. This property, this block in particular, because of the mill race, was one of the more densely developed with industrial type uses in historic Provo. The project team consists of a few different entities. J.B. Earl Company Redstone Residential is one of the larger investors and operators in real estate in Utah County. Millstream Partners has become a specialized financing group in opportunity zone financing projects. This lies within an opportunity zone. And then our architects are out of New York, and I've worked with them on a number of projects both in New York and Utah, and they bring a different design sense and approach to projects, and it has been received favorably by the community, by the public, by the school board, by the city. The location, you can see we're just a couple blocks south of this building. We sit at the junction of University Avenue and the Front Runner Station, essentially, right next to the startup building. And you can see here an aerial image that probably the best view of giving you an idea of the proximity to the Front Runner Station. And you can see on the right side of the block is the viaduct that goes up and over the train tracks. So that creates this block as the gateway to downtown Provo. You can also see, I'm going to show a slide in a minute, but on the Front Runner block, there's a cleared gravel area in the parking lot immediately to the right of where the buses are. That is a landing pad for a pedestrian bridge that Mountain Land Association of Governments, Provo, UTA have gone in together and received a Tiger grant for over $3 million to put a pedestrian bridge from that landing spot across the train tracks, and we're donating a portion of the property on the north side of 600 South for the bridge to land and clear 600 South, providing free movement for pedestrians, bicyclists to get from downtown Provo to the site safely, to the Front Runner Station safely. So the programming of the project consists of those 3 shorter buildings are 5 stories of multifamily for rent. We call those affectionately the West, the Middle, and the Wrap building. It's called the Wrap building because that skinny parcel on the left side, skinny building, wraps around a parking structure. The tall building on the top left is a condo tower, 10 stories of residential above 3 levels of parking for 13 stories total. And then the building on the right, the tall building on the right, is an office tower with 9 stories of office above 5 levels of parking for 14 stories total. So it's a mixed-use project. It's separately programmed with lots of outdoor amenity spaces. We call them canyons between the long, skinny buildings because you've got the buildings on the sides and some great foliage and plantings and vegetation in the middle. We've got outdoor rooftop amenity spaces. We've got pedestrian bridges connecting the project. There's event space currently programmed for the top floor of the office building as well as the top floor of the condo building. We're in discussions with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is interested in putting an urban meeting house inside the office building. This would be a pilot program for them as projects near transit stations are being developed. They are realizing that 5-acre surface parked meeting houses can't be near transit. So rather than making hundreds of people that choose a car-reduced lifestyle hop in a car to drive to a meeting house, they're exploring the possibilities of bringing meeting houses to the people, and this is one project that we are moving down the road to try to accommodate. We're also providing a number of workforce housing units that are below a certain AMI, median area income, to the project as well. This just shows some of the programmed amenity spaces and common spaces, including rooftop amenities, canyon amenities, pedestrian bridges, both bisecting the site. You can see in blue, and then you can see the pedestrian bridge from the front runner station coming into the project from the south to the north. Here's a view of what we envision the canyons looking like as the trees mature and the vegetation matures. We're exploring some kind of forward-thinking concepts such as stormwater capture systems from the roof that would capture stormwater into cisterns on the site. They could also provide some surface flowing water features such as shown here in the image. We are also looking at large-scale solar and have talked with Provo City about a purchase agreement with them and Rocky Mountain Power, and they're on board right now with that as well. We're doing some crazy things like monitoring the progression of passenger drones, in other words, flying taxis. I mean, it's not a thing now. It's not a thing in the next 15 years, but you know, when an office tower is built, it's there for 100 years. So I think we'd all be crazy to assume that in 100 years we don't have them, considering they're testing those right now in other cities. So that's something we're looking at. Another thing that we're looking at, which we think is unique, is the parking structure themselves. And I've got an image. This image can show you, this is the south, as if you were hovering above the front runner station, you're looking north, you can kind of see the city center temple there, and the county building would be just to the right as well, up on Center Street. But you can see that there's several layers of parking structure. We're designing those so that the outside of the parking structure is flat, is level, as well as taller than a typical parking structure, because when on-demand vehicles become real in Utah, such as I'm pulling up my Uber app or my Lyft app and I'm summoning an autonomous vehicle, we believe that car ownership, car usage will drop significantly, and we want parking structures to be able to be backfilled with additional office or residential space. A lot of developers are developing parking structures that are 100% ramped because that's so efficient, or you try and reduce the floor plates as much as possible because that's so efficient, or you've got these big T-bars, you know, they're called double T beams that support the structure, and they come down with, you know, 6 feet 7 inches or some dimension like that, and it makes it impossible to use the space for anything but parking in the future. We believe that probably 15 years from now, cities are going to start waking up and saying, yeah, we don't need the same parking ratios that we required back in 2019. Therefore, yeah, you should backfill that empty parking structure with additional space. So those are some of the things that we think it's forward thinking, and maybe it'll be backwards thinking in 20 years because it never happens. We'll see. But as I mentioned, this is a view from the south looking north. You can kind of see the canyons between there. There's some rooftop amenities that you can see, and hovering above our building is a flying drone. So that's a flying taxi.
I was wondering what that
pretty
was.
This is the view of the condo tower as you're driving south on University. You can kind of barely see on the left the viaduct going up and over the train tracks, but this is what the view would look like from that angle. And then I can't emphasize enough the project's proximity to transit. It's at the southernmost stop now. We know that will change as it proceeds down to, the front runner proceeds down to Payson and beyond at some point. But currently, it's one of the busier intermodal hubs, and we're just one stop away from UVU. We're 2 stops away from the start of Silicon Slopes, easy access to the airports. But then the other interesting thing is the BRT line, the UVX line. This is the only property in, block that really has direct access to 2 BRT stations. We've got access to the front runner station as well as the one on University just to the north of the site, which makes this probably the most transit-oriented location within all of Provo and maybe in Utah County today. And I'm sure you've heard the statistics of the wild success that the UVX line has had due to their short wait times, over 1 million ridership within just a few months, outstripping any of the pro forma projections. Here's a view of the pedestrian bridge, these images were provided by UTA. It says UVU on it because they're planning on utilizing a similar look and feel as the pedestrian bridge going over I-15 between the transit station there and UVU. They're going to bring that same style to this bridge here at the Provo station. Okay, so bear with me. I'll go through this quickly. I've pulled up the Provo City School District policies for tax increment financing. I was not able to find the county's, explicit standards for what you look for in a tax increment project. I've highlighted a few of these policies. Some are not relevant, I'm sure, to the county, but some of these seem like interests would be aligned between the school district as well as the county. So I'm going to highlight just a few of the policies that were explicitly satisfying for the school board, hoping that there's some crossover to the county. This one probably is not, but for instance, Provo School District will contribute no more than 5% of the Provo total property tax revenues toward all economic development projects. Currently, the school district is contributing 1.62% of total revenues towards economic development, and if this were to come online, it would be 2.38. And then there's another large aircraft, I believe, user requesting increment over by the airport, which would bring their increment usage to 3.8%. So we're still far below their 5% cap if this were to happen. If the county has a cap as well, I'd be happy to calculate where this would affect that. Another policy, board decision to financially support a project requires strong long-term partnership to be established between benefiting entities with the district and some expectation of a future return on investment to the school district, such as donations, programmatic support, use of space facilities. So we proposed to the school district, and they like this idea. We have several large gathering spaces in the project, and currently the district rents space from Zions Bank or the Wells Fargo Tower or other facilities, and we've offered to donate some space in the project, either on the 13th floor of the clubhouse, the top floor clubhouse of the condo tower, or in the event space that will be in the office building to the extent that we control that space, or within the multifamily clubhouse because there's space there. And if that's something that would be required by the county, we would offer the same thing as well if there's ever a need for space outside of the county buildings. Evaluation of the project area without a tax increment. Evaluation of the viability of the project without the increment will be a major factor in determining. So we're providing over 450 jobs to the community in the office tower, as well as we're providing over 400 residential units. That's going to require over 663 structured parking stalls at a cost of about $16 million. The tax increment from the school district at their percentages would be around 4.47 million. That'd cover about 27% of the cost of the parking. And if the county were to participate per this request, up to $767,000, that would cover about 4.6% of the covered park or the structured parking costs. Further, part of the parking structure, we intend to provide some public parking stalls that could be accessed when we're not. There's various hours in a mixed-use project when residential has higher demand, when the office has higher demand, when a meeting house would have higher demand, when event space would have higher demand, and there's times when we have excess capacity, and we would like to, we've already offered, and the city's requested that we provide some of those stalls during those times as public parking. We're going to do that as well. Well, like the gentleman before me, these numbers are pretty small. I've highlighted the information in the big text above. The district must receive an agreed upon percentage of the tax increment immediately. So the RDA parcel, which is the purple parcel on the plat map or the aerial image, it's a quarter of the block. It's 25% of the block, and it currently does not contribute anything to the tax rolls because it's owned by the city. And as soon as we bring this project to fruition, we're bringing $769,000 of value back onto the tax rolls, and we're proposing that 100% of that goes towards the taxing entities. Unfortunately, the county's dollar amount's quite small, it just doesn't produce that much tax revenue today to the county. So when that happens, it would be a net of $670 a year. So it's pretty nominal. But as far as percentages go, it's 100%, and that would be immediate upon we get the certificate of occupancy. And then you can see that we've highlighted the county. It's the top line on the table below, and you can see that the increment does increase significantly to the county over time, and it goes from, let's see, I think it's $1,900 to start off in 2019. And then in 2021, you can see that there's a significant bump to over $10,000 annually. And that's because that's when the first phase of the project comes online and receives its certificate of occupancy. So the taxable value significantly increases. Then you can see that there's another major bump in 2023 and, 2023 and 2024. So the project is phased into multiple phases, 4 major buildings, and as each of those come online over the next 5 to 10 years, there's a major step up in valuation, which increases tax revenues.
What makes it jump so much in the very end?
I'm just showing what the full freight is when the increment falls off.
Okay, because I mean, 2035 is at 24,000, and 2036 is at 89,000.
Correct. So our request, which is on another slide, is a 75% increment from the county. So when that 75% rolls off the project and it's no longer applicable, you now get 100% instead of 25%. So it jumps significantly. So I just added that extra year to show what is the full freight that you'll get when the increment rolls off. Another policy, an evaluation of how many new jobs and the impact on the district enrollments generated by the project. I think jobs is applicable to you. I don't think that the next one really is, but the office building will be over 100,000 square feet, providing over 450 jobs. And we're gonna add 6 jobs with property management. The rest of the information on there, if you really wanna dig into it, it just shows, the bottom image shows over the last 20 years, office space per employee has dropped from 600 square feet per employee to 151 square feet per employee. And there's a lot of data and statistics out there. We've calculated the 456 jobs would fit in the 100,000 square feet office space based on a private office is between 200 to 400 square feet. Cubicles have a range. You allocate a certain square footage to break rooms, to reception areas, restrooms, corridors, mail rooms, etc. So that's how we've derived the 456 jobs. Obviously, until we have employers and leases or sales confirmed, we won't know who's coming and exactly how many, but that's based on national data, a fair and safe assumption.
Are you doing retail space at the bottom levels of those apartments?
Along 100 West, let me jump back to, this is probably a good image to see. Can you, the face of the building closest to us, so that's 100 West. We're kind of looking south east in this image, so that's 100 West there. Provo City has identified 100 West as the major north-south pedestrian spine of the city because when New Skin bought 100 West up at Center Street, they closed that road off. It's not a preferred means of transportation for vehicles. Vehicles would rather go on University or Freedom, which means a lot less traffic on 100 West. So the city's identified that as a major pedestrian corridor. And then when that bridge goes from the front runner station to the corner of 100 West, that just further reinforces that. So that's a long answer to, because of all of those factors, the city, as well as the neighbors that own the startup buildings across the street, there's like an incubator office space and the startup candy building and all those right there. We've signed a memorandum of understanding so that when that west building, the one closest to us, is built, that's the last phase in the project, We will build the floor plates higher than a residential standard so that it can accommodate retail, and that to the extent that we have interest from retailers, we've agreed to our best faith effort to bring those retailers in to 100 West. We think it contributes to the whole neighborhood and it's best for the project, so we'd like to see that happen. Does that answer that question?
Yeah.
So without being 100% binding, we've committed to do everything that we can to bring in the retailers, including making the physical facility able to easily accommodate that.
And so are you thinking forward to on parking for that too, as well, if you got retail space there?
Yeah, so you can see that there's, I want to say there's 40 stalls along
Yeah.
100 West of street parking. We're looking at adding more street parking as well along 500 South, as well as underneath that west building. The entire basement is underground parking underneath just the west building.
Okay.
If you really want to get into this, we can get into this, but the point we're making on this slide is there's not going to be very many children here. Generally, our renters are, and people that would purchase here are comprised of folks that are between 25 and 35, and they typically move out when they have a second child that no longer sleeps in the same room with mom. So generally, all the kids are 4 years of age or younger, and then they relocate, any children that are there, or they're between 55 and 75. They're empty nesters. They want to be close to a temple or downtown environment, a walkable community. So those are the folks that live here. District policies, projects that have a high probability of spawning substantial additional new construction without tax subsidies. So other projects will be built that won't ask for increment, or those that will provide higher future tax revenues will be given higher consideration. So some of this first stuff is anecdotal, but individuals from multiple organizations have stated their belief that this project is going to spur significant economic development in the area, including Provo City, the RDA. That's why they bought this parcel in the first place, because if this whole block is developed, it's gonna spill over to the adjacent parcels, and it already has. There's another parcel put under contract just to the north of this for redevelopment. Mountain Land Association of Governments, in meeting with them, they're very excited about what this is going to do for the area. UTA, Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, Provo Town Center Mall is thrilled that this is coming. They really think this will help revitalize the area. The neighboring property owners are excited, the public. The comments on the right of the screen are screenshot images of Facebook comments. I mean, it's Facebook, so, take it for what it's worth. Not a lot. But there are, again, it's anecdotal, but I love some of the quotes. As I said, I believe that this project will be the impetus for even more things to come in a somewhat blighted area. I can see this having a ripple effect spreading in many different directions in the area. Next comment, I honestly think Provo is ready to go up. It's becoming more urban. With our airport also expanding, this will only increase demand for residential and office. Next comment, I love this too, but with so many other cool proposed projects, I believe it when I see it. If this is actually built, it may be the necessary catalyst to bring retail to East Bay. We think so. It seems like it will spark positive development in that whole area. Was not the best view when first coming over the viaduct. And the last one, this is pretty tall. It would block some of my view from the lake from my front yard, but that block is an eyesore now. I hate high density, but if it's anywhere, this will be a great area and bring life back to East Bay. So it's anecdotal. I get it. I don't have surveys or, market studies that would say this will have a ripple effect. Intuitively, we know it will. Intuitively, all these other entities and the public knows it will. We're going to bring 450 units to the property. That's going to provide more people that need lunch and dinner, and we're going to bring 450 jobs to the area. So we're providing both daytime and nighttime population. And then when we bring the pedestrian bridge across, thousands of pedestrians will be using this north-south spine. The last one, the city is encouraged to bring truly blighted areas or areas which, for various reasons, have high probability of not being developed some other way to the board for consideration. Blighted conditions exist, not just on one side, but on every angle, pretty much every street frontage on this block. You can see examples of blight. And you can see the boarded up windows, you can see where the graffiti's been painted over multiple times. You know, again, boarded up, vandalism, graffiti, homelessness. The timeline for the project, we'd like to proceed immediately this fall with phase one, demolition and construction. And so the multifamily and the condo tower would go simultaneously. As soon as those are stabilized and absorbed, we'd like to start on the next phase, which is the office tower, and then into the last residential phase. And the whole thing completed within about 5 years. So the project is asking for 75% increment over 15 years. We think this project will be a catalyst for substantial redevelopment in the whole area. We think it'll bring hundreds of jobs. It'll provide daytime, nighttime population. It's going to facilitate the pedestrian pathways. It's going to increase the increment for all the taxing entities, especially with the IFA parcel coming back on the rolls. We have here the district can utilize space. If that's something of interest to the county, we can explore that. And the entire block currently brings in less tax revenue than just one of the new buildings that is proposed for the property. So we're hoping to increase the tax base significantly. That's the project. That's my presentation. Love to
Thank you.
answer questions.
All right, any questions?
It's a very cool looking project, so.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. We're excited about it.
All right, thank you. We'll,
Lunch.
you know Todd? You've met with
I
Todd?
don't, but
Okay.
I'm sure David's
Okay.
quite familiar with him.
Yeah. Make sure and bring it up to Todd as well, so we can know he works on our economic development side, and be good to have his input in there too.
Great. Appreciate your
Okay,
time.
thank you.
Thank you.
All right, that was our last presentation. Is there? Yes. Is there any public comment? Seeing none, we will move quickly. We're going to do our litigation first. So thank you for coming. And those that are in our litigation closed meeting, if you'd stay, and we'll get moving as fast as we can.